name's Coby, and my capstone was about the shifting coho salmon catch patterns in the Puget Sound, and I evaluated the seasonal and spatial trends to help it better inform sustainable management. And yeah, some background, I got the idea behind this project because in the summer of 2024, I was working as a scientific technician at an access point over at Everett, at the Everett boat launch with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And through this job, I collected a lot of data regarding coho and chinook, a lot of biological data as well as quantitative data through just counting them and measuring and whatnot. And I noticed that a lot of the fishermen that would talk to me that summer were specifically commenting on how early the coho were running and how much more bountiful it's been over the past couple of years, and they seem to think that they're starting to run earlier and in bigger numbers. And I was kind of curious about the validity of these claims, so I wanted to explore that a little bit further. And to do this, I initially went to the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website because I knew that they had a lot of public creel data going back a fair bit of time. But then I realized I only had a decade of data available, and I sort of had to think, what could I do with this? And yeah, I generated the hypothesis that coho salmon catch patterns in the Puget Sound have significantly shifted over the past 5 decades, with changes in area level dominance and run timing. And my goal was that there would be no significant shift in the spatial distributions or timings of the catch. And the way I did this was Professor Quinn saw that I only had a decade of data and helped me out by providing me with creel data that went back to 1967 through 2023, which greatly expanded the amount of data I had, and I could, work much more reliably through it. And there are a lot of biases that come with the form of data in terms of creel surveys, because as in the name, they are surveys and they're access-based surveys, and because of this, I had to take into account things like spatial bias, which basically refers to we are at these specific access points interviewing anglers there, but there are also access points that are less accessible, and those fishermen there are not being taken into account, as well as effort bias. A lot of the more popular boat launches and fishing areas are generally around where I was, like Everett and this whole Seattle area, like 8-1, 8-2, 9, and 10. And I had to take into account that there are going to be more employees there, more effort in those areas as well. And then naturally with surveys, there's also always going to be reporting bias, and that basically just talks about how fishermen are human and sometimes they're not so honest. And I could definitely, while I was working there were sometimes fishermen who would not take the surveys, they would just go right by. Or sometimes they would talk about, like, if I tell you this, is our season going to be cut short? And even if they told me their data or told me about their fishing trip afterwards, if that mindset is sort of permeating around the community, you can sort of assume that there will be some bad apples that aren't entirely honest. And then, lastly, I had to take into account temporal sampling bias, which basically just refers to the way that we take these surveys is not continuous, it's not 24/7. There are employees from like 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., but the time between those points you can't really take into account, like night fishermen or people that come back super early. You'll miss those people, and that'll skew or not fully report the amount of catch and whatnot. And yeah, I chose areas 8.1, 8.2, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 because as you can see here, it sort of goes all the way through the Puget Sound area, and I thought that would be well representative of what I was trying to do. And yeah, as for the data, as I said before, Professor Quinn was a huge help and helped give me that data set that went from 1967 to 2023. And as for the specific data I was using, I used total catch, months, years, and fishing area to figure out all the temporal and spatial stuff I wanted to organize. And for data cleaning, I did a lot of that in R and Excel, of course, and non-coho entries were removed and missing values were filtered. And then for statistical analysis, I used a one-way ANOVA to test if the differences in catch were significantly or statistically significant across the decades. And here we get to some of the graphs, and these are the temporal trends. Here you can see that we've got this chart here that goes over the yearly coho catch by area. And then here I also just have a proportional graph that pretty much shows this, but might be a little more pleasing on the eyes. And as you can see, Area 9 has historically always been super dominant. And you can kind of see that it goes down this line of 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. 10 and 11, fairly close most of the time. I mean, there are definitely chunks, like you can see 1970 to around 1980-ish. There were chunks where Area 11 was really a bit of a second powerhouse, and then sort of diminishes its influence over time. And then, spatial trends, you can see here that this is like the decadal coho catch by area. And you can see how, again, Area 9 is always very influential, but you can also see that in 1990 and 2000, you can see that areas 8.1 and 8.2 are starting to take some of the load off of Area 9. And you notice that Area 9's influence starts to decrease, and then these two areas' influence starts to really pick up. And then, for seasonal trends, you can notice here how in pretty much every area, except for 13, which is a little weird, September and August are generally the most productive months of the year in terms of coho timings, which indicates that, August, September is generally when they start to really run through the areas. And you can also notice that Area 13, for some reason, July tends to be really strong for them. And when you look at the map, it's kind of confusing how that works. Conclusions basically showed that the ANOVA test that I conducted did show that there was significant change over time, and that Area 9's dominance has sort of been on the decline as a result of the introduction, or potentially as a result of the introduction of areas 8.1 and 8.2. And it shows that there's some emerging importance from the other areas. And the study as a whole showed that spatial and seasonal catch patterns are changing, and this can be due to environmental conditions, regulations, hatchery production, climate change. Further study would be needed to fully figure out what specifically could be responsible for this. And as for regulations, it does show that there is need for dynamic regulatory frameworks because things are changing, and adaptive management is very crucial in keeping up with that change. And yeah, I would just like to really thank Professor Quinn because he's been really patient with me this year, and yeah, it's been very difficult and he's been a great help.
Can you back up to the map? I'm just wondering about 13 is which one? Oh, down at Olympic.
Yeah, you would think generally that they'd be scooting their way all the way down, and then you would think that they'd be hitting there last. So it's kind of strange that July is where they're hitting the most. But that could also be due to the fact that 13 does have a lot of resident coho that sort of stay there year round.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. But yeah. You know, I was working here, and a lot of the people there, I mean, it was a super popular boat ramp because, I mean, it's Everett, and a lot of people around there really like fishing, and yeah, Area 9 was extremely productive that year.
Do you have any inclination that there might be more of a certain bias in a certain area?
Yeah, I think that especially these Seattle-ish areas, I think that effort bias is huge there just because populations of fishermen are much larger around there too. As you go down south, there are just fewer people going on the water, and I think that definitely results in some potentially inflated numbers and whatnot. Yeah.
When you were going through the state-provided data sets, was there any time span that would have indicated like temporal closures or incomplete data due to shortened or otherwise impacted seasons for the coho runs?
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, with the data that they provided, it didn't go back so far, and I noticed that there's also a fair bit of, I don't know why, but like inconsistency and stuff like that. But yeah, I think also something we're talking about is like regulatory bias. A lot of people, I think also, while I was working there, a lot of people tended to ignore regulations a bit, and that can also mess with things. Yeah.
I've had that same technician job out of Area 5 in CQ.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about with the anglers that are dishonest or otherwise, like, I only put down 2, but really, you know, I found more out there, but that's all I'm going to tell you. It's a really difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Did they tell you that? Like, I'm giving you the answer of 2, but I actually,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, no, there were some people like that. Some people would just hang around in the marina or around the dock and then just have somebody jump off, get their truck, and then just quickly leave to avoid us. It was funny. Yeah, anglers not too big of fans of us for the most part, but it's okay. I think for the most part, people were relatively cooperative. I think a lot of the data that they weren't too honest about was like how many fish they released and stuff, because yeah, releases, I think a lot of them just think that telling us about how many fish they release will result in those going towards catch numbers and then regulatory just like closure of the area sooner.